The ink on the settlement agreement hadn't even dried when Kent straightened his tie and smiled at me, like we'd just wrapped up a business deal that bored him. He was wearing the charcoal blazer I'd bought him for his 42nd birthday. The one that cost more than our first month's rent in the apartment we'd shared before the marriage, before my father's firm, before everything. Haley stood just outside the attorney's conference room door, visible through the glass panel, checking her phone with the patient boredom of someone who's already mentally redecorating. She was wearing my platinum card around her wrist in the form of a Cartier bracelet I recognized immediately. I had reported it missing 8 months ago. "No hard feelings, Laurel," Kent said, pushing the folder back across the mahogany table. "We just ran our course." I looked at him for a long moment. The sandy hair he spent 40 minutes styling every morning. The jaw he kept carefully stubbled because a client once told him it made him look trustworthy. 7 years of marriage, and I had spent most of them trying to convince myself that what I was seeing wasn't what it was. I said. He waited, maybe for tears, maybe for the kind of parting shot that would let him feel justified. I gave him neither. I picked up my copy of the documents, clicked my pen closed, and dropped it into my bag. "Take care of yourself," I said. He laughed, that soft, disbelieving laugh men make when a woman doesn't react the way they rehearsed, and walked out to join Haley. Through the glass, I watched them leave together, her hand slipping into the crook of his elbow. Both of them moving like people who had just collected something they'd been owed for a long time. The room was very quiet after that. The attorney, a woman named Suzanne, who I'd used professionally before and trusted, set a box of tissues on the table without a word. I shook my head. "I'm okay," I said. "I just need a minute." She nodded and stepped out. I sat there alone in the conference room of a law office that was not my father's, in downtown Nashville, on a Thursday in April that smelled like someone had left a candle burning too long. 7 years. I'd known something was wrong for at least 3 of them, maybe 4. I'd told myself I was being paranoid. I'd told myself Kent was ambitious, not scheming. I'd told myself his mother Shirley was just protective of her son, not calculating. I had been so determined to believe in the version of my life I had chosen that I had chosen to be blind to what was actually in front of me. I took out my phone. The contact I needed was listed simply as Dad. He picked up on the second ring. "It's done," I said. There was a pause. Not the awkward kind, the kind that comes when someone is giving a moment the weight it deserves. "Where are you?" Hugh asked. "Suzanne's office, 6th Avenue. Go sit in your car, don't drive yet, just sit." I did what he said. I made it to the parking garage before my composure finished dissolving, and then I sat in my car and cried in a way I hadn't since my mother's funeral. Ugly, full-body crying that steamed up the windows. I cried for the years I'd spent defending Kent to my father. For the Christmas dinners where I'd watched Shirley charm everyone in the room, while her brother Dale quietly photocopied client intake forms he had no business touching. For every night I'd rationalized a late meeting, an unexplained charge, a silence where there should have been honesty. When it passed, I called my father back. "I'm okay," I said. "I know you are." His voice was steady. Hugh Whitmore had built Whitmore Legal Group from a 2-attorney practice into a 60-person firm over 35 years. He'd survived 3 recessions, 2 partner disputes, and 1 spectacular downtown flood that took out the entire first floor of our building. He did not rattle. "Come to the office. We have some things to discuss." "Dad." "Not over the phone. Come in." I wiped my face with the back of my hand, put the car in reverse, and drove. My father was waiting in his office on the 14th floor, the one with the view of the Cumberland River that he refused to upgrade because he said the original desk had good bones. He looked older than I remembered from even 6 months ago. Thinner through the shoulders, the lines around his eyes deeper. And something about seeing that made my chest ache in a way the divorce itself hadn't. He stood when I walked in, and I let him hug me without saying anything for almost a full minute. Then he sat me down, poured 2 cups of coffee from the carafe on his credenza, and set a manila folder on the desk between us. "I want you to know I didn't open this until you called," he said. "It's been sitting in my safe for 4 months. I wasn't going to use it until you were ready." I looked at the folder. "What is it?" "Our forensic accountant's report, and some additional documentation our investigator compiled." He paused. "Laurel, I knew what Kent was doing inside this firm. I've known most of it for over a year. I hired someone to look into it quietly after Gordon flagged some anomalies in the billing system last spring. Gordon Marsh had been our director of operations for 18 years. He was not a man who flagged things lightly. I stared at my father. You knew. I was waiting for you to be ready to hear it. I opened the folder. What I found inside took me 20 minutes to read through. Kent had been systematically redirecting billable hours, crediting work done by our associates to a shell client account he controlled, then billing that account at partner rates, and having the difference wired to a business checking account Haley had opened in Delaware 6 months after Kent and I got married. His total take over 4 years, just under $200,000. His mother, Shirley, who had come aboard as a client liaison coordinator after the wedding and immediately begun recruiting her siblings, had been running a parallel operation. Dale, installed as billing administrator, had inflated vendor invoices and collected kickbacks. Rhonda, who managed paralegal scheduling, had been billing client accounts for hours that were never worked. Shirley's 3 family members had cost the firm nearly $300,000 across 5 years. They had done it carefully, incrementally, the kind of long-running bleed designed to stay below the threshold that triggers an automatic audit. How long have Dale and Rhonda been here? I asked, though I knew. Dale came aboard 2 months after the wedding. Rhonda, 4 months after that. I closed the folder, and you still let them stay. I let them stay because my daughter was in love with that man, and I didn't want to be the reason her marriage failed before it had a chance. He held my gaze. I was wrong to wait. As long as I did, I should have protected the firm sooner. But I also knew that if I'd pushed you then, you would have fought me, and I would have lost you both. I thought about all the times I'd defended Kent to my father. All the dinners where Hugh had grown quiet when Kent spoke about the firm's growth strategy. And I'd assumed it was generational friction, old money stubbornness. I thought about how I'd once told Kent, after one of those dinners, that my father needed to learn to trust the people I trusted. Dad, I said. Don't, he said. There's no point in that now. What matters is what happens next. The question is whether you want to be here for it. I looked out the window at the river, silver gray in the April light. Then I looked back at my father. Call Gordon, I said. Tell him I'll be at the firm at 9 tomorrow morning. I wore the navy suit my mother had bought me the year before she died. She'd had impeccable instincts about what situations called for, and I thought about that as I rode the elevator up to 14 the next mornings and felt the building shift under my feet the way it does when you return somewhere after a long absence and realize you'd been away too long. Gordon was waiting near the elevator bank with 2 of our corporate security staff and a woman from our legal compliance team. He shook my hand with both of his. Good to have you back in the right capacity, he said. I nodded. Is she here? Conference room B, acting like she owns the place. Shirley had arrived at 8:15, I was told, as she had every day for 5 years, walking in with her badge, pouring herself a cup of coffee from the good machine, commandeering the large conference room for what she called her planning sessions, which consisted mainly of her and Rhonda reviewing documents they had no authorization to access. I walked to the conference room. Through the glass, I could see Shirley sitting at the head of the long table, her reading glasses on, talking on her personal cell phone. She was wearing a blazer with the firm's logo, something she'd apparently had made for herself and several of her relatives without anyone's approval. She looked comfortable. She looked like someone who had made herself at home and expected to stay. I opened the door. She looked up. For a fraction of a second, something crossed her face, surprise, and beneath that, a flash of something harder. Then she pulled the familiar expression back into place, warm, maternal, slightly confused. Laurel, honey, what are you doing here? She said it gently, like I was a child who'd wandered into the wrong room. This is my father's firm, Shirley. I walked to the head of the table, the chair she was sitting in, and stood beside it. And effective this morning, I'm returning as managing partner. I need you to clear your things. She laughed, actually laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. Managing partner? Honey, you haven't worked a full week here in 3 years. You were playing housewife. What does that even? Gordon, I said. Gordon stepped into the room and stood near the door. He opened the folder in his hands. Per directive from the chairman and majority partner, Hugh Whitmore, effective immediately, the employment of Shirley Aldridge, Dale Morrow, and Rhonda Morrow is terminated for cause. Gordon read steadily, without emotion. He'd been doing this for a long time. Cause includes unauthorized access to client files, fraudulent billing manipulation, and receipt of funds derived from vendor invoice inflation in violation of Tennessee Professional Responsibility, Rules 1.15 and 8.4. All building access cards have been deactivated as of 7 this morning. All associated user accounts have been suspended. You are asked to leave the premises within the next 30 minutes. Shirley's composure broke so fast it was almost architectural, like watching a wall that looked solid turn out to have nothing behind it. You are out of your mind, she said. Her voice had lost all its warmth. Everything my family did, we did to help this firm. Dale streamlined billing. Rhonda improved scheduling efficiency. You have no idea. $312,000 over 5 years, I said. We have the wire transfer records, Shirley. We have the vendor invoices with the inflated figures. We have the timestamps showing those invoices were approved from Dale's terminal and cross-referenced with Rhonda's scheduling logs. I kept my voice flat. The documentation has already been provided to the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit and to the Tennessee Bar Association. What happens next is not my decision. What happens right now in this building is that you leave. She stood up. Her hands were shaking, but her jaw was set. I will sue this firm for wrongful termination. I will call Kent. He will. Kent has been terminated as well, Gordon said. And the Bar Association complaint against him for misappropriation of client funds is already filed. That landed. I watched Shirley absorb it, watched the realization move through her face that the structure she'd spent 7 years building, the position she'd carved out for herself and her family inside a firm she hadn't built and didn't understand, was gone. Our security staff walked her and her belongings out within the hour. He texted me that afternoon. Can we talk? Just once. I'm asking you as someone who used to matter to you. I met him at a coffee shop near Vanderbilt, a small, low-lit place we'd gone to once, years ago, when things between us were still good and I still believed in what we were building. He was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth, his hands wrapped around a mug he clearly hadn't touched. He looked like he hadn't slept. He looked like a man who had spent 24 hours discovering how quickly a house of cards falls when one card moves. I sat across from him. I did not take off my coat. Laurel. His voice was rough. I know what you're thinking. I know how this looks. But I need you to understand that what happened with the money, that was complicated. I was trying to build something for us. A nest egg. A backup plan in case things at your father's firm ever. Kent. He stopped. I reached into my bag and set my phone on the table between us, face up. I pressed play. The recording was from 14 months ago. Kent's voice, laughing, easy, talking to Haley in what he believed was the privacy of his car. She doesn't even check the accounts anymore. Hugh's slowing down. He's not catching anything. By the time they figure it out, we'll have enough to launch on our own and we'll be long gone. Haley's voice, softer. What about Laurel? Kent, without a pause. Laurel will be fine. She'll go back to Daddy, and Daddy will take care of her. That's what she does. I stopped the recording. Kent stared at the phone. He didn't speak. I've already provided a copy of this to the U.S. Attorney's Office, I said, along with the forensic accounting report. The Bar Association complaint was filed yesterday. Your license is going to be suspended pending investigation, and based on what Gordon's documentation shows, the suspension is going to become permanent. Laurel? You can keep Haley. I genuinely hope she's worth it. I put my phone back in my bag and stood. Hire a criminal attorney, a good one, not one of ours. I walked out into the April afternoon and felt, for the first time in longer than I could remember, like I was breathing actual air. I had hoped that would be the end of it. 3 days later, Shirley showed up in the lobby of Whitmore Legal with a handmade sign and her eldest son from a previous relationship, a man named Wade who worked in insurance and seemed deeply uncomfortable with the whole situation. The sign read, Whitmore Legal destroys families. Consagrate. Greed Ryan's lives. Our front desk called me. I told them to let her stand there. I watched on the lobby security feed for 40 minutes while Shirley made her case to anyone who walked by. 2 mail carriers, a UPS driver, 3 of our associates who tried to avoid eye contact, and a courier who accidentally filmed her for 15 seconds before realizing and putting his phone away. The situation had the energy of a protest that had miscalculated its own momentum. Then I took the elevator down. When I walked into the lobby, Shirley immediately raised her sign higher. There she is. The woman who threw an entire family out on the street to settle a personal score. My son who gave years to this firm, is looking at losing his license because of her vindictiveness. My siblings may be arrested. Ask her. Ask her if any of this is justice. The two associates near the reception desk looked at me, then at Shirley, then at the floor. Shirley, I said, I'm not going to ask you to leave. You have every right to stand on a public sidewalk. I gestured toward the front door. But the lobby is private property, and if you'd like to continue this conversation here, I'm happy to have it in front of everyone. She lowered the sign slightly. The firm has already provided full documentation to both federal investigators and the state bar. I continued, loud enough for anyone nearby to hear clearly. The charges against Dale and Rhonda aren't personal. They're the result of a forensic audit that showed, with wire transfer receipts and timestamps, that they used their access inside this firm to steal from our clients. From people who came to us for legal help and trusted that their money was being managed honestly. That's who was actually hurt here, Shirley. Not me. Not my father. Our clients. Something shifted in her face. Not remorse. Something closer to the slow, unwilling recognition of someone who has been running from a fact and has finally run out of road. She lowered the sign completely. My family needed those jobs, she said, and for the first time, her voice sounded less like a weapon and more like what it was. A tired woman who had gambled with other people's livelihoods and lost, and who was only now understanding the full size of what she'd done. Then I'm sorry it came to this, I said. And I was. It is possible to want justice and still grieve what made it necessary. She left. Wade, visibly relieved, followed her out without looking back. I didn't expect to hear from Cooper. He was Kent's nephew. Shirley's late sister's son, 23, a junior paralegal who had been brought on 2 years ago, in the same quiet, nepotistic way the others had been folded in. I had always found him polite and slightly overwhelmed. He had shown up each morning, 5 minutes early, and spent most staff meetings trying very hard to look like he belonged. He knocked on my office door late on a Friday afternoon, after most people had left for the weekend. He looked terrible, pale, jaw tight, hands shoved in his jacket pockets. Ms. Whitmore, he said, I need to tell you something. He sat across from my desk for 40 minutes. He told me that 3 months ago, Rhonda had asked him to sign off on a set of paralegal billing logs that he hadn't actually worked. Phantom hours, dated to a week when he'd been out sick. She told him everyone did it, that it was how the family kept the firm profitable, that if he made trouble there would be no room for him in the new firm Kent and Haley were planning to open. He had signed the logs. He had known it was wrong. He had not been able to sleep more than a few hours a night since. I'm not asking for anything, Cooper said. His voice was steady, but his hands weren't. I can't let the investigators find those logs without someone telling them I knew what they were. I don't want to be protected by a lie. I looked at him for a long moment, 23 years old. He had been handed a set of choices by people who should have protected him from having to make them. You understand that you'll need to give a formal statement, I said, to our attorneys and to the federal investigators. It will be uncomfortable. Yes, ma'am. And the documents you signed, they'll be part of the record. I know. Okay. I picked up my phone and texted our lead outside counsel to come in Monday morning. I'll make sure the investigators understand the context. I can't promise you any particular outcome, but I can promise you that what you just did matters. He nodded. He looked like he'd set something down that had been very heavy. For what it's worth, I said as he stood to leave. The people who put you in that position were wrong to do it. Whatever happens from here, you did the right thing today. He left. I sat in the quiet of the office for a while, watching the last of the afternoon light move across the river. Kent was arrested on a Tuesday night. He had used a secondary key card, one that had been issued to a vendor account he controlled, and that our security team hadn't caught during the initial deactivation sweep. To enter the building after hours, he was found in the records room attempting to copy client files onto an external drive. Our overnight security guard detained him. The police arrived within 12 minutes. The charge was theft of trade secrets, which is a federal offense, and Kent apparently hadn't known or hadn't believed that it would be handled at that level. His attorney called my attorney the following morning to discuss resolution options. My attorney told his attorney that there was nothing to resolve. That same week, Dale and Rhonda were formally charged by the U.S. Attorney's Office with wire fraud. Shirley called me once from a number I didn't recognize. I listened for about 90 seconds, while she told me that I had destroyed her family and that God would judge me for it. Then I said, very quietly, I hope he's fair to both of us, and ended the call. The Saturday after the charges were filed, I drove my father out to Harpeth Hills Memory Gardens, where my mother had been buried 11 years ago. Hugh doesn't drive anymore. His eyes aren't reliable past dusk, so I took the wheel of his old Buick, the one he's had since 2014 and refuses to give up because it belonged to my mother first. The drive out was quiet in the good way. He had the window cracked. We passed a Kroger and a gas station and a Baptist church with a marquee sign that said, "The storm is the work cut." And my father pointed at it without comment, which was very much his style. My mother's name was Greta Whitmore. She had been a kindergarten teacher for 22 years and was the kind of person who remembered every child she had ever taught and most of their parents. She would have had a lot to say about Kent. She would have said it exactly once, and then never brought it up again, because that was also her style. We sat on the bench near her headstone for a long time without talking. I had brought yellow tulips because she loved them. My father had brought a crossword puzzle he didn't open. "Do you think I should have left sooner?" I asked. "Yes," he said, without hesitation. "Probably by year 3. That's honest." "You asked." I laughed, which surprised me. "Why didn't you say something more forcefully?" He turned the crossword puzzle over in his hands. "Because you would have dug in. You always dig in when you feel cornered. Your mother was the same way." He paused. "And because I think some things have to be learned from inside them, not from outside. If I'd marched in and fired Kent and his family myself, you would have spent years wondering if I was right, or if I'd just taken something from you. This way." He shrugged. "You know what you know. You made the call, the company is intact, and you're sitting here." I thought about that for a while. "The firm is going to need a real managing partner," he said, "not a temporary one." "I know." "You ready for that?" I looked at my mother's name, carved in the stone, clean and permanent. Thought about the look on Cooper's face when he sat down across from my desk and told me the truth, even though it cost him something. Thought about Gordon, who had flagged the anomaly in the billing system and waited, patiently, for someone with the authority to act on it. Thought about how many people inside that building had been quietly depending on someone to show up. "Yes," I said, "I think I am." My father nodded slowly, like that was the answer he'd been waiting for, but hadn't wanted to rush. The afternoon was warm and smelled like cut grass, and somewhere distant, someone was running a lawnmower. We stayed until the shadows went long, and then I drove my father home, and the city opened up ahead of us, bright and specific and fully real.